Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. It's really nice to see all of you today, but let's leave a couple of minutes just so people who are joining us from all across the world really do have some buffer so they can watch this webinar as well. My name is Stepan. I run customer success here at Productive. And today we will talk about project management. So basically how to run your project in Productive using a feature that we call tasks. So without further ado, I believe we do have a lot of people joining us right now. So I think we're good to go. We are? Yeah, I think we are. Okay, perfect. Today, as I said, we will talk about project management that we do with tasks. And honestly, if you are really new to tasks, I think this will be truly a cool opportunity to learn how to use them. Or if you are an already experienced project manager, this will be really useful to kind of refresh your knowledge and perhaps learn something new directly from us. So let's quickly go to the topics that we will cover today. First, we will talk about creating and managing tasks. So how to create a task, and once you have created it, how you can organize your project with tasks. Then I'm going to show you how to organize and structure your project. Also, we'll talk about establishing a workflow, because today we will also talk about the newest feature that we have released just yesterday. It's called workflows. And I'm also going to show you a brand new feature that will be released in a couple of days or weeks. We'll see what happens. So before I say anything else, let's do a quick recap, because if you watch our previous webinar, we have talked about macro planning. So I hope that you at this point know the difference. But today we'll talk about micro planning. So just a quick recap: macro planning is when you are planning your work on a more higher level, meaning that you are concerned with who is working at what project in a larger scope of time. But then with micro planning, which we are talking about today, we are really interested in the details. So I want to know who is working on a specific task. I want to see the full detail. And also I want to know who is doing exactly what. Again, if you are interested in macro planning, you should go back and check out our webinar that we have made on that topic. I think it was like a couple of weeks ago. Okay. But let me perhaps show you on a demo how it looks, because it's much easier to understand. So here I have a project that my company is running for a client, and this project is concerned with social media posts. This is as generic as it gets, so I'll try to keep it as clear as possible so then you can apply this to your business as well. So first, I would have to open a task. I can do this by clicking here, or I can click on a specific task list, and that will add a task as well. To save both me and you some time, let's quickly go to pre-made task. And full disclosure, please pardon these stupid puns, but I just couldn't help myself. So prior to creating a task, or when I create a task, I should then add the title of a task. Ideally, this will say to the person who is concerned with this task in one sentence what should be done. So just by looking at the title, they will kind of have a vague idea what needs to be done. Then you should also add the description. This is really useful because then they will obviously know what should be done in this task in detail. You can also add like rich text formatting with like bold text and italics. You can add bulleted lists, number lists. You can add emojis, and you can also add attachments. So those can be, let's say, PDFs. They could be images, videos, whatever. Then you should also add the assignee, and an assignee should be only one person. We have explicitly said that an assignee should be only one person, mostly because then it's super clear who needs to finish this task. If you have two people as assignees, it could be a bit confusing. So the assignee is essentially the person who has to deliver this task. Then you can also add some extra info as well. For example, you can also add date and time in a sense that this task can have a start date and an end date, or just an end date. Obviously, this means that a task has to be started at a certain point in time or delivered at a certain point in time. You can also create it a repeating sequence, and this will follow the sequence that you have established here. So this task can then repeat itself each day, each week, each month, or even each year. That's really up to you. So once you have created this task, and let's say that I did it right here, now it's time to actually go into the minor details just to see if it fits your workflow. So let's start with subtasks. Subtasks are basically tasks that are connected to the main task, in a sense that if you have a bigger piece of work, it's much easier to break it down into smaller pieces using subtasks. So for example, this is my main task. It's called Other Delights Vegan Cheese. Again, sorry. And then I have subtasks that are directly connected to it. So this task is a fully fledged task. It has a title, it has a description, it has an assignee. I can also add due time and due date to it if I want to, but it's clearly connected to this main task in the hierarchy. Also, you can add TODOs and compare with subtasks. These are smaller entities, so they function like single actions. Let's say I've assigned this to do to this person right here, and once they're done with this to do, they can just click right here, and then it's off their checklist. Okay, so you can also track time on tasks. Be mindful of the fact that when you track time, it's connected to a particular service. So you would still have to select a service that you want to track time to. For example, here, let me track time on graphic design. And in Productive's mind, I'm still tracking time on graphic design. I'm just using a task to be super specific and just to say that while I was working on graphic design, I was working on this particular task. You can also do it in reverse, in a sense that you would first track time and then you would apply it to a specific task. Okay, I would then also suggest that you use comments. Comments would kind of work like threaded discussions, in a sense like Reddit or any similar message board. And this is really cool because then you can track the progress of your task and collaborate with people and have the history of collaboration right here. So I would use it just to, let's say, make suggestions. I would use it if I'm sharing this task with clients. And when I'm talking about clients, you can also make comments private. So for example, if you have clients collaborating on this project with you, you can also hide some comments from clients as well. Okay, so now that you know how a task works, and now that you know how the structure of a task works, let me show you how you can actually run your project. Because it's one thing to create a bunch of tasks, but another thing is actually to go through phases or different workflows for that matter. The most classic way would be to use task lists. So task lists are basically groups of tasks. How will you group your tasks? It's really up to you. Mostly it's by phase, it's by line of work, or whatever suits you. Here I'm using task lists that are divided into phases. So I have brainstorming, I have in progress, I have done, I have delivery. So as I move each task through each task list, that obviously moves it to a different phase that I have established. Now this is the classic way of using it, but we have actually developed a new feature that I've mentioned on the beginning. It's called workflows. So quickly, let me go to settings. And then here I'll go to workflows. And here you can establish a couple of workflows or more that you can use on specific projects. I will edit an existing workflow just to save us some time. So here you can use custom statuses and custom types of work just to see if the work that you are doing right now is still in its beginning, so it's not started. Is it started or is it closed? Before, if you remember, you had only two types of statuses. So it was started or closed. But now we have also added the third type, which is not started. And in those types, you can add custom statuses. So if I still have not started working on something, I can create custom statuses under that category, which will then tell me in which status this particular task is. You can change the color, you can add a different name to it, you can rearrange them if you'd like. And then once you are done with configuration, then you can actually use them in a project. So let me quickly go back to the original project that we were using. And then I'll hit the sidebar here. And here I can also select if I will use this particular workflow in this project. So here under change workflow, I can select the type of workflow, if I'm using multiple workflows, obviously, to use on this project. Here I have already established that I will use this particular workflow. And now when I go to a task, I can then select a status from the status dropdown. So obviously, let's say that this task is now in the icebox status, but I can quickly change it in progress, let's say. The cool thing here is that I'm actually having some subtasks here, and these subtasks are using different statuses than their parent task is. So you can use that as well. And if I'm using a different view, let's say I'm using the list view, then I can also inline change the status of each task. Okay, that's how you would use workflows. We believe that it's really cool, that it will really change the way that you are using tasks at this point, and it will truly help you with delivering your tasks in a much more faster way. And especially if you have really complex phases of work, you will just love this. Okay, now let's talk about custom fields. This is also one way how you can customize your tasks. And custom fields are essentially your custom classification of data. So essentially, it can be a dropdown, it can be a date field, it can be a text field, whatever. First, you would configure your custom fields here in the sidebar. And then once you have created your custom fields, you will apply them to each task specifically. So quickly, let me go to this task. And here, I'm using a dropdown that's called priority. So that will tell me how important my task is. And I'm also using a calendar type of, or a date type of custom field, which will tell me when should this post be launched. Now this date field is quite different from this due date field, but I'll explain that later. Okay, once you have configured all of this, so the number of tasks, the workflows that you will be using, the custom fields, if you want to use them, now it's time to actually configure how your project will look. Because just looking at this, I mean, it's already a lot of things going on. I have a lot of tasks, but what I really want to do is just tailor the stuff that's really important to me. So for that, I will use views. And views are used as a configuration of your project. So I would first configure what I want to see, because then later I will be much more easier to find what I'm actually looking for. So let me first start with layouts. A layout is basically how your tasks will be presented. So you can use a Kanban-like chart if you use boards. You can use the calendar view. You can use the list view, the timeline view. That's really something that should be decided by yourself. But let's say that at this point, I'm using the board view. You can also add fields, and fields will then be shown to you on each card. So perhaps let me add here priority. So now at a glance, I can see what is the priority of each task here. Then You can also group tasks by different parameters. So here I'm grouping them by task list, but obviously since I'm using workflows, I can group them by status. So now I can see my tasks in this Kanban view grouped by which status they are in right now. One thing that you should also do is to filter. So then obviously I want to filter it by assignee. Let's say I want to see tasks assigned to this person. So now I'm looking at tasks only assigned to this person. Once you are done with your configuration, you would hit here on save. And then you can save it as a view. Let's call it perhaps Bessie tasks. And then here I can select if this view will be public or private. So if this view is visible to everyone, that means that each person that can view this project, they will see this exact configuration. If I leave it private, then I will be the only person who can see it. So let me create this view. And now this view is here in my views dropdown. So here I see a list of views that I've created so far. I can also see if they are private or if they are public. And also I can click here and pin the favorite view right here, so it always stays right there. One thing to remember is that Productive will always remember your last selection. So if this was my previous selection, then if I refresh this, it will come back right to this view. Okay, once you have configured your project, it's time to talk about some use cases. Okay, so now that you have configured your view, and now that your project is mostly there, let's now talk about a couple of use cases that I think you can use in your work as well, because they're pretty much generic. So let me quickly go to this task. And here I'm actually using a custom field called social media launch. And this is a date custom field. So it's different than the due date of the task. So the use case here would be that this social media post needs to be launched on this particular date. And then the task has to be delivered on this particular date. What does this mean? Let's say that you have an SEO person that needs to launch a task on this date, and then the project manager or the person who is in charge of financing this campaign, they have to deliver this task on this point. And the best thing is, both of them can filter their respective categories. So let's say that I'm an SEO person. I want to see when something has to be launched. So I'll just search for that particular custom field. I think it was called social media launch. Yes, that's correct. So it's social media launch. And now let me search for this month. So now I know which task or which post needs to be released in the scope of this month. Okay, and now let's talk about our second use case here. And I will show you how you can group your task by certain parameters. So first, let me group these tasks by the assignee. Obviously, now I'm looking at tasks grouped by each person. Let me just remove these filters. So now I'm looking at all tasks grouped by each person. Obviously, if I should move this task here, that means that I'm actually reassigning this task from Bessie to Charles. Then let's talk about, honestly, my favorite layout here. It's the timeline view. So right now, I'm looking at tasks grouped by people. So it has remembered my previous grouping. So now I can actually see who will deliver something at what point in time. Okay, this doesn't look really useful to me. So let me perhaps add a splash of color. I'll click here, and then I'll color it by priority. Okay, this is a bit more meaningful. So now I'm looking at tasks grouped by each person and tasks with a time component. So tasks that have both a start date and an end date. Of course, tasks shown in the timeline can have just the end date as well. So let me perhaps filter tasks that are really important. So now I'm looking at tasks that are really important because they have the custom field of high priority assigned to them. So looking at here, I see that Charles needs to deliver this task on the 28th. Lucy needs to deliver, or sorry, that's a task that's unassigned, so I should probably assign it to someone. And then Bessie has to deliver this task up until the 27th. Now let me show you a new feature that we will release at some point next week or next month, I'm not really sure. But it's also connected to tasks, and quickly right here. So this is our redesigned list view. The difference is that now you can actually do a lot of inline editing. So for example, these tasks have statuses added to them. So this task has a status of backlog, but now I can also change it right here. I can also add the due date from this overview, and I can change the assignee from here as well. I'm adding this to my lovely colleague Michael. I can also preview my tasks in a much more elegant way. So let's say that I want to see what's in this task. And then when I'm going through my list, I can just click on the tasks from the list. And then I will see the content without actually going into the task. If I really need to go into this particular task, I can just click here and then expand it. Or if I want to go back to the overview, I can just collapse it. So now I can see both the task and the list of tasks. You can also resize these if you'd like, and you can add different fields here as well. Okay, so this will be released sometime, not really sure when, but you will see it as an update in your productive app. Okay, cool. So I believe now it's time for your questions.